pleased to have two great speakers today. I'll introduce myself as I'm Barbara Mowat. I'm the founder and president of GroYourBiz. And on the line, we have two wonderful managing directors and chairs, Mark Hatchie, who is in Ontario, and Leanne Hackman-Carty, who is in Alberta. And Susie Graff, who is in both the chair in Vaughan and Aurora, and welcome. So today the topic is tough decision making, and I want to introduce, I'll do a quick little bio description of both Brandy and Linda. And I first met Brandy in Tucson, Arizona, where she was living and was one of the first board members, GYB board members in Tucson. And then, voila, she moved to Spokane, Washington. And so wanted to continue with GYB. So she is with the Calgary, with Leanne and the Calgary Virtual Board. Leanne and Brandy really has done a lot of corporate training programs, from leadership and management coaching, team building, talent development, and culture strengthening. And she's got a certificate in adult learning, and from the Association of Talent Development and Management Foundation. She's also a certified practitioner and analyst for behaviors and motivation through her Target Training International organization. She is the only certified practitioner and coach of what is called the BioCode system in the Western United States, which is most intriguing. I want to find out more about that, Brandy. And Linda was first introduced to GroYourBiz through Leanne, who is the author of Master Your Disaster. I'd give a plug for that because she was doing a big project in Puerto Rico when they went through their horrific, I guess, disasters. Now two of them, first the hurricane, then the flood, and met with Linda. And Linda is the founder and leader of What's Next Ventures. And it's a consulting practice that has done everything from growth for startups to small and medium-sized companies. And her experience spans all of Americas, Caribbean, and the European regions. And both of them today, and she's worked in many industries, technology, media, consumer product goods industries. And today it's a very important topic called tough decision making. And what they will do is walk you through a process to help participants understand that decision making is even more important and challenging now during these challenging times, and how it differs from why would you have to make crucial decisions before COVID and the crucial decisions you need to make now. So the difference between the normal and the crucial decision makings. And they will look at the tools, provide you with tools and guidance to navigate COVID-19. And I know that many of us have done a lot of these webinars. And so I want to thank all of you in advance for being a part of this. And I know that we have a lot of more people that sign up. So don't be discouraged by the number on this call. So for example, we will have 40 or 42 sign up, and it's because they can't particularly join at this time. So we track who goes back to them, and we have all of their emails. And so we have that in place. And I think that happened even last week, is that we had 42 sign up and only 16 came online. But
Barbara, we feel that this is a conversation between us, so we're not really worried.
Okay.
I think
just
that,
let me know though.
Yeah, no, we're not worried. We're not worried.
Okay,
yeah.
Thanks, Linda.
But thank you for that. We're definitely not
I
worried.
just want you to know that there's a lot more people that are interested in this topic, and they will always go back. In fact, they still go back to Leanne 2 years ago for her LinkedIn session. So it's like amazing. It's amazing, right? Yeah. So I just want you to say that there is a chat box, and please, as you're listening to this session and you have a question, please write it down, and we'll give time at the end to try to answer any of those. And Alicia will keep track, and we'll see it on the side. So welcome again, and Brandy and Linda, over to you.
All right, so I'm going to kick us off. I'm just going to get my screen up really quickly here and make sure everyone can see it. All right, can everyone see? You can nod your heads. Okay, perfect, thank you. So I first want to thank GroYourBiz and Barbara and Leanne for having us today. This is a super relevant topic right now, given where we are with COVID, given where we are with discussion about easing restrictions and sort of reopening and reentry. So Linda and I wanted to have this conversation, and our focus is really going to be about what decisions, what thoughts, what planning do you need to put in place today in terms of your business strategy, in terms of your next steps, and in terms of your workforce. So, you know, you guys don't need Linda or I to tell you that these past 8 to 10 weeks have been full of all kinds of adventures and changes. In fact, pretty much the most consistent thing that we've experienced in these past few weeks is the constant change, right? And now what we're beginning to see is we're beginning to see a shift a little bit away from, oh my gosh, how am I going to keep the lights on? And more toward, okay, I need to be thinking about what reentry looks like. So we're, I think Alicia said it really, really well in our conversation before the presentation started. And she said, we're kind of in this weird spot where we're still dealing with COVID, but we're kind of looking forward to what's on the other side. So we're seeing that some countries are reopening. We're seeing that several states in the US, starting last Friday, are actually beginning to ease restrictions, which is exciting, but brings some other changes, right?
Yeah, actually, it is a really interesting time, but what's curious to me is, Brandy, that in talking to a lot of my customers and colleagues, is that we're all sort of still dealing with the big 3 questions, right? How do we operate in this environment? How do we tread water until the next phase? And how do we plan for reentry? And what I've noticed as I talk to people, not just throughout the different states that are loosening up, but around the world, is that as leaders and as entrepreneurs, we're going to continue to juggle all 3 as the context in your location and industry and company changes. You know, if you are an essential business, or are an essential business in the second phase, like accountants and in the financial services, your context and what you're thinking about changes is dramatically different from people who are in retail right now. But as you shift and you enter the different phases, you'll continue to have to handle these questions and adjust your company and your plan accordingly.
Right. So there's a couple really important truths to be keeping in mind right now. Even though we're beginning to see an easing of restrictions, it doesn't necessarily mean that we all get to run back to the office tomorrow and turn the lights on and throw the doors open and that everything is going to go back to normal. In fact, normal, the way that we remember it, no longer really exists. So the other thing to keep in mind is that whatever your COVID-19 response was, like, congratulations, that response, that strategy got you to where you are today, which is fantastic. But that may not be the appropriate strategy as we move toward reentry.
Yeah, actually, I mean, you couldn't be more right. I think, but for start, congratulations, you made it this far. And I'm sure that you did whatever you needed to do to just figure out how, not just to keep your lights on, but to tread water, right? Whether that was, if you're a retailer, you turned up the volume on e-commerce. If you were a restaurant, then you shifted towards deliveries and takeout. If you were in software, you probably repackaged, or consulting, like in our case, Brandy, that we talked a lot about it, is like we repackaged and sort of moved a little bit, moved the needle, moved our products and services to align to what our clients needed. But in this second wave, I think we need to think about it as not the new normal, but really the new normal. Because, you really need to ask yourself, how do I rethink my operations? Does it make sense to function at a 25% capacity if you're a restaurant? Does it make sense to think, as malls are opening and people are standing in line, yeah, there's going to be an initial pent-up consumerism, but over time, is that realistic? Right. So the first question is, in my opinion, as you're thinking through this new normal, one, is it feasible? And two, is it worthwhile? And you need to figure out what were the success factors that brought you to this point? And how can it create a new way forward? And really, Brandy, I mean, we've talked about, for our customer clients, do you need an evolutionary change? So it's like tweaking it, or do you just need a revolutionary change at this point, which means, whiteboard, throw the playbook out and start over. And I think that for a lot of industries, that's where we're going to be, unfortunately.
Right. So this is really what we're going to be talking about today, right? What are those next steps forward? So before we jump into content, I know Barbara gave a really wonderful introduction to Linda and I, but I just wanted to touch on a few high points before we jump into content. So Linda, tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, well, for start, thank you so much for taking time to spend time with us and have this conversation. And by the way, please interrupt us and ask us questions as we go along. And as Barbara mentioned, my company, What's Next Ventures, we focus on helping companies through their growth trajectory, from identifying whether you have a sound business model, capitalizing on new market opportunities, as well as expanding into new sectors or markets. And I've had the good fortune of working with firms both during good times and bad. And I'm really looking forward to sharing some of these lessons earned as I've navigated through previous crises, most recently the Great Recession of 2008 and post-Hurricane Maria here in Puerto Rico. And honestly, there is no set playbook, but candidly, there's some very specific lessons that we can grab hold of to develop a new path forward, and not just succeed, but really, or get over the hump, but really thrive in this new environment. And, I'm really honored to share the stage with Brandy, because I've learned so much about how to navigate through her. If management and leadership is both an art and a science, honestly, Brandy's the master, and she's really helped me rethink and instrumental on decision making and selecting talent and working with different organizations. So again, thank you for sharing some time.
So I gotta tell you guys, I tell everyone that I meet that Linda is the person that you want to talk to in terms of strategy, in terms of positioning, in terms of sales and marketing. She is super creative, and she's been through a lot of really interesting things. So she's got some great ideas and sort of out of the box thinking, which is awesome. So as Barbara mentioned, I'm Brandy Ferrer. I run a consultancy company called Pathfinder Strategies. And the focus of our work is organizational culture. And there are several pieces that go along with that. Where we find ourselves spending a lot of time today with our clients is around team alignment and leadership development. So now more than ever, with many teams working remotely, with changes in the workforce, our teams don't necessarily look the same. Collaboration and connection are more important than they've ever been before. So we spend a lot of our time helping our clients figure out those strategies, keeping the workforce engaged, keeping everyone's well-being where it needs to be, and sort of being able to move forward. On the leadership side of things, you guys we're in a really interesting time, and leaders are being called upon to think in different ways and support their team members and run their companies, frankly, in different ways than we've ever been before. So that's a lot of what we're spending our time doing right now as well. So in terms of our focus today, this is what we're going to talk about, right? What decisions do you need to be thinking about, planning for, executing now? And what things do you need to be thinking about a month from now and 2 months from now? As part of that conversation, it's really important to think about what is your current context, right? Where are you as a company? Your workforce might look different, right? So your mix of talent and skills and the people that are with you might look different than it did 10 weeks ago. The approach to risk, both for yourself as the person who maybe steers the ship for your company, you might be feeling a little bit risk adverse. Certainly, there's an expectation that customers are going to be more risk adverse. We're dealing with limited finance and slow growth. So this is the current state for a lot of us. So how are you going to make decisions in this environment?
Yeah, I mean, basically what that sounds like to me, Brandy, is welcome. We're all startups now. and as such, you will be flying the plane while you're building it. And that's and while you're, headed out there in the world with no net underneath. And so it's a really scary and uncomfortable time for us as leaders of our team, leaders of our companies, and just personally. But it's possible to get to the other side. But the reality is that in order to build and fly at the same time, you need to do two things. On the one end, you need to right now continue doing what you're doing and accelerating that pace. So if your structure is working and you're generating sales and you're keeping your lights on for the next couple of weeks, think summer, right? You're finessing and accelerating because right now you just want activity and get cash in. But at the same time, you're creating for that new normal. Think maybe fall, right? And you need to think about who your firm will be based on that environment and landscape that you talked about, Brandy, but also how are you going to operate and what kinds of continuous decisions you're going to be making as a leader, which will be many perhaps unexpected, but continuous for yourself and for your team.
Yeah. So here's a couple thoughts as leaders, as the captain of your ship, right? I mentioned that leadership right now doesn't look like it did 10 weeks ago. The things that are priorities to us have shifted and continue to shift. The way that we're supporting the people that we work with has changed. And here's some other things that we're dealing with, right? So as Linda mentioned, we're kind of juggling a couple different strategies. We're accelerating that keep the lights on strategy, but we're also figuring out what are the next steps? What is the reentry strategy that's going to look like? One of the biggest challenges I've seen for leaders since the onset of this crisis is the fact that we as leaders, we like to be the problem solvers. We like to fix things. We like to have the answers or know where to go to find them. So in other words, we like to be the knower. Well, in this current context, none of us are knowers, right? There is no playbook. So I've seen a really important shift that those who are thriving in this time, they're making, which is a shift to being the learner. And as such, there's a couple of things that you guys should keep in mind. One of which is this is such an important time to stay connected with your networks. GroYourBiz is such an amazing example of this because that is a safe space, right? That's your advisory board. That's the place that you go where you know you're going to get the support that you need. You know that you're going to be able to bounce ideas around and test out products and services and strategies without judgment. If you need to vent, if you need to cry, you can do that there too. But that's a place where you can go to get some diverse ideas and also share ideas as well. And then I think it's really important too, as a learner, to keep in mind, seek out ideas from other places. I'll give you guys a really great example of this. There was a hospital, and they were struggling with really high death rates after a particular surgical procedure. And when they noticed this, they took a very traditional approach to solving this problem, right? They brought the head surgeon in, they brought all the big wigs in, they brought the chief of staff in, and they internally tried to resolve this. And it seemed like no matter what they did, they weren't able to have any kind of sustained success. So completely randomly, this group of surgeons that was involved with this procedure, they went to a NASCAR race together. So they're at this NASCAR race, they're watching all these cars go around the track, and they watch with amazement as the car pulls into the little pit area, and the pit crew comes out, and they lift the car, and they change the tires, and they change the oil, and they check all the fluids, and they do the brake. They do all of this in 2 minutes or less without talking to one another, without talking to the driver. So this group of surgeons actually met with this pit crew and like, what are you guys doing? How are you able to operate so seamlessly and so effectively? You're doing all this very quickly. You don't have a lot of car crashes. Like, obviously, you know your stuff. So this pit crew gave these surgeons all kinds of really great advice, which the surgeons went back and applied with their pre-op team. And lo and behold, several months later, they began to see a reduction in those post-procedure death rates. So the point of this example is that these surgeons are getting ideas from people that work on a racetrack, right? Someone that's completely out of their industry. So now is definitely the time to do that as a learner. So Linda, talk to us a little bit about context right now.
Yeah, so at this point, if you've met, you've definitely established a close relationship with your CFO, your accountant, your, department head, and have gotten a really strong handle on your finances and your budgets. And unfortunately, this is not a dress rehearsal, Brandy. I mean, every dollar at this point really counts. And your context right now should be allocating every single dollar to where you're really going to have the best return and the best impact. And what that means is that if you're running a department or you're running a company, your focus really needs to be, do I need to reach out to someone that is not even in my potential client base? Or do I focus on someone who perhaps I haven't talked to in 6 months? Well, really, it's the latter, because that person you could probably convert into a client right now. Or finessing that message to create connectedness with your current clients or potential clients to your message. And really, it's a lesson that, interestingly, some of us don't really get unless we go from a really large organization to a startup, or we change industries. I mean, Brandy, you have the best example that I've seen thus far.
Yeah, so I used to work for the 8th largest privately held mortgage company in the country, and this was back in 2007. Well, that was when everything fell apart, but so that's where I worked prior to that. And budget was never an issue. Like, nobody ever talked about the budget. If you needed something, you just got it. You just bought it, right? You didn't have to justify anything. It was fantastic. So we always had the resources. We always had the technology and everything that we needed. So I went from that to working for a public school system and running my own budget and really having to advocate hard for the things that mattered and were important. And for me, that might be 10 items on my list, but I would have to figure out how to shore that up to 3 items. Yeah. And it was a really interesting lesson in prioritizing and maximizing those dollars.
Yeah. And I think that that's where we're going to be for a really long time, irrespective of how big your company is, because you really want to focus. I mean, one of the things as you're preparing for, let's just say phase 3, the new normal, you're going to need to, one of the things that I have encountered with some companies is they're not really sure if they're even relevant in the new economic landscape. I mean, your consumers or your clients may be really risk averse. Um, for some, elective surgeries are not even a choice. So if you had a bad hip, you might need to hobble through for the next 6 months, right? The other piece is some of your customers, not only will they be forced to postpone decisions because of the environment, but also maybe they have limited dollars, or they have different interests, or they may, woe is me, found an alternative solution since you've been closed. And so what do you do in a situation like that? I think that one of the things that you need to think about right now is to go through and tighten the reins, as I said previously, on your cash flow and conduct sales triage to pull in sales quickly. But as you're thinking through, you need to evaluate your strategic options. You need to review your product portfolio or your offers and figure out who are the do you need all of them? Who are the dogs that you're going to need to get rid of right now? And who are the stars? Or who are the things that perhaps were not in the forefront previously that you can push forward? So that's one thing. The other is, in addition to reviewing your product portfolio, is figuring out your strategic options. I mean, for many of us in good times, we can just target a very large population. But right now, you need to determine whether it's better to just go super niche. So instead of, like in my case, that I work with both late stage startups, small businesses, and mid-sized businesses, maybe I need to narrow that focus, because maybe most companies are not thinking about expanding into international markets, but they may need to think about generating new growth and how do they scale their operations. Some people may not have the luxury of repackaging the solutions and may need to pivot, as I said previously. And if that's the case, then you need to go back and reassess the marketplace, figure out what is the right value proposition, if you can deliver on that promise, and even if you can actually deliver, like the logistics behind it. And most of all, if you have the right people for it. Because in many cases, most of you have had to lay off your team.
Right. Yeah, I think that's such an important point, Linda, because having the right strategy, having the right mix of products and services, yes, absolutely, that is very important. But at the end of the day, right, it's the people who execute the strategy. It's your team members who are going to help actually move things forward. So in terms of your workforce, there are some important things to be thinking about and keeping in mind right now, right? So first, it's important to do a current state evaluation. Many of us, as Linda mentioned, we've had to lay people off. Some people have had to be furloughed. So it's time to kind of look around and say, okay, well, what skills and talents are here? What's left? And then, of course, it's important to be thinking about, okay, as we move into this new normal, what is that next set of skills? What is that next set of talents that are going to be important to keeping us open and moving us toward success? So this is where you want to be thinking about, do I have the ability to rehire some of those people that were laid off? Can we eliminate furloughs, right? You also want to be thinking about, and this is a really important point, how is it going to look as you reopen the office, right? So if you're a traditional brick and mortar, you have a location, this is really a key factor. I was talking to a client who works in insurance, and they've got 75 employees. It's a very traditional office setting. And they're already thinking about, how are we going to bring people back and still have social distancing guidelines in place? How are we going to interface effectively with our customers? How are people going to be able to collaborate effectively? How are we going to keep the workplace safe? So these are all the things that they're thinking about now and planning for, even though they're not likely to open their doors again for another probably 3 to 4 weeks. So in addition to that piece of it, there's a couple of things that I want to point out in terms of, actually, let me go through this first. So what tactics and actions do you need to be thinking about now? Well, as I mentioned, I need to be planning for what the new normal looks like. So if I'm going to be able to, maybe on a limited basis, reopen my retail shop, I need to think about who I'm going to have on the floor. I need to think about how I'm going to be serving those clients. What are those skills that I need? Do we need to go through and do more layoffs? There's a lot of discussion about that. Or are we in a position that we can rehire or bring new people in? There's a local marketing company here in Spokane, and they have done such a great job with this, not only through the, through March and April, but they're doing a really good job planning. So what they did when their company first had to shut down, or their office had to shut down, was they came up with an if-then plan, right? So they took a look at their finances and their operations, and they said, okay, well, we know everyone has to have one furlough day a week, right? So, and we're going to have to keep that model if our revenue stays the same. However, if our revenue decreases, then we know that we're going to have to start looking at layoffs, or we're going to have to start looking at pay reductions. If we're able to bring in more business, more revenue, which they did because they changed strategies, then that means we can then bring all of those furloughs, we can get rid of the furloughs and everybody working full time, and we might even be able to hire people, new people. So, they had this sort of if-then plan, which was really, really effective. Linda, I know you had a counter example to this.
Yeah, actually, what's really interesting is that your agency was able to take what they had already done and create a space to be successful. On the other end, I know of an agency here in Puerto Rico, actually, that have had to completely reinvent themselves. They're a company that's really focused on branding and product packaging, and their niche, and they tend to focus mostly on startups. Well, investor money has dried up. So if you haven't already started selling, then you can't pay the ad agency. And they have had to completely shift their focus towards helping people like us generate exposure. So they're building podcasts for people. They're building very specific promotional activities and tools for companies that are not startups. And the talent that they've needed is completely different from their usual set that tends to be graphic designers and packaging designers. And so they've had to completely hire a new talent pool, which, I'm rooting for them. She's phenomenal. And I'm hoping that after this, now she'll be able to have two different businesses that will mitigate some of this constant risk that you face when you're only working with startups.
Yeah, and not everyone is going to be in a position of rehiring or being able to hire new people, right? Yeah. Some of us are like, hey, we got to go with what we got. So if that's the case, you want to look at the individuals and the talents and the skills that you have on your team now and say, okay, well, what kind of training do they need, or do we need to change roles and responsibilities? Because now is the time that you want to establish those expectations, put that training in place. So when the new normal comes, you turn the switch and everyone's ready to go.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I want to add, Brandy, and I think that you were going to say it, is that the people that you have are probably your most flexible and resilient people. So these are the team, this is the team that is just going to roll with the punches. And you could probably throw into new situations in the deep end of the pool, and they're going to figure out a way to swim. And so, I mean.
So one last thing I want to mention about reopening the office. So I talked about some of the logistical pieces that go along with that, but there's also this, there's some degree of fear that a lot of people are experiencing as they sort of prepare to go back to work. And that fear comes from, to some degree, I actually had a conversation with somebody a couple of days ago, and they said, hey, look, I've got an employee who that lives with them, and the person is high risk. So this employee is fearful about coming to work and then going home and transmitting something to their parents. So you're going to hear those concerns. You're going to hear questions and concerns about, well, we've been working from home and we've been productive. Why can't we continue in that fashion? So those are the conversations that you want to prepare for. Those are the plans that you want to have in place. One more thing I want to mention, and this is more about the well-being of your workforce, right? So I think it's really important as leaders that we remember this. We're conscientious of not only your team's well-being, but of your own well-being. And I'll share with you a little bit of a few examples on this. So initially, when we all started this work from home experiment, if you will, the traditional wisdom was like, oh, it's going to be great. And we're going to be super productive and cool. I don't have to wear pants. Like everyone was really excited about it, right? But what we're finding, Bloomberg News actually did a really great article on this. Now that we've had some time to do the studies and do some research, what we're finding is, yes, people are more productive, but at what expense, right? So people are working on average about 3 hours more a day. And what's driving that is, in part, there's no separation, right? A lot of us have our laptops set up in our dining rooms or our kitchens. And so it's very easy at 6:30 in the morning when we're having our coffee, like, oh, I'm just going to log in and check emails. Or at, 11 o'clock at night when you're hitting up the fridge for that midnight snack, oh, let me just check on the status of this. So that separation doesn't exist like it did before. There's also some degree of fear, right? And this is especially true for those team members that remain when others have been laid off. And there's the sense of, I don't want to be the next one on the chopping block. I have to show my value in some way. So I'm going to burn the midnight oil. I'm going to be super productive. So there's not a good reason to get rid of me if that need comes about. And then finally, a lot of us, myself included, we juggle having kids. So we're juggling daycare. We're juggling having to figure out this online schooling thing. And that's taking away from our productivity. So we'll just add more hours to the day and it'll be fine. So there's sort of this dark side of working from home. There's also the stress of preparing to go back to the office. So you heard me mention the safety concerns, which of course are valid, but there's also a continued sense of uncertainty. What is my position going to look like? What are my responsibilities going to be? Maybe I have a job today. Am I going to be employed next week? So again, you want to be thinking about, this is where a lot of your team members are. Obviously, supporting the team is vitally important. And as a leader right now, that means so much more than just answering questions and solving problems and coaching, right?
Yeah, it's about bringing your team and your culture, maintaining that, right, Brandy?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. And when I say support right now, it's not just, yes, there's a cultural piece, but it's also like, hey boss, I'm having a meltdown, right? I'm falling apart here because I can't get my kid to do their homework. Or I just had this meeting with a client and it went terribly because the dog wouldn't stop barking. So it's support on a different level, on a much more personal level than it has been before. And then of course, you've got to be taking care of yourself. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about self-care. However, the fact of the matter is that nobody, not even you, not even me, none of us have the ability to function at our highest and best when we're in a state of high degrees of stress and anxiety and fear. That's true for your team members and it's true for you. Now, we like to think, I'm gonna get the cape out and I'm the captain of the ship and I'm leading this company and I got it figured out. But again, our effectiveness only spans so far when we're operating from that place of fear and anxiety and stress. And then finally, have fun. Now, I don't say that because I'm like, woo, I'm the cheerleader. I say that because there is a physiological thing that happens when people laugh, when they smile, when they have even moments of fun, enjoyment, or joy. And what happens physiologically is when we're smiling or laughing, our brain sends a message to our body that says, hey, I know you got some cortisol floating around in there. You got some unresolved stress hormones hanging out. but I'm smiling and I'm laughing. So things must be okay. So you can let go of a little bit of that stress, right? And ultimately that helps with focus and productivity and being able to do the work. So Linda, you had a really great example of,
Yeah, I do, but I want to go back to some of the questions. There were a couple of questions on the chat in regards to culture and cohesiveness.
yeah,
This self-care and this, I mean, I don't know if you want to address it, but in general, I think that being an empathetic manager and leader and being connected more personally with your employees, number one, will minimize this fear of, oh my God, I'm next on the chopping block. It will help answer. And I think that, I mean, Brandy, in the last time that you and I had a presentation like this, we talked about how important it was for leaders to be transparent at this time and being able to just say, look, I don't know,
yeah,
but I am going to get the answers for you.
absolutely. Yeah,
And I think that's really important. And that would minimize some of that uncertainty and, oh my gosh, and perhaps guilt that you got to stay with your job and your best friend didn't.
yeah.
And I think it'll be really challenging. And I'm not really sure, Brandy, if it's even a fair question. How do you even, I don't think that people will ask that question, but I'm wondering if that creates a bit of an undercurrent that this team lunches or water cooler Wednesdays could help minimize, right? Because in an indirect way, you're answering the question why you got to stay and someone else didn't.
Absolutely. So I want to, you brought up several really great points, Linda. So I want to just touch on a few of those. Transparency right now, if I had to pull out 3 of the most important leadership traits right now in this context, it would be empathy, flexibility, and transparency.
Yeah.
And then I would probably throw connection in there as well as a 4th one. So the transparency thing, you know, I did a presentation recently called Fearless Leadership in Challenging Times. And this is a lot of what we talked about, that it's important to have a plan of communication and execute it, right? So, hey, every Tuesday at 10, that's our team meeting. Every Fridays, that's when we do our one-to-one. So it sounds small, but you're creating an expectation of being able to communicate at very particular times, right? And any kind of normalcy that leaders can establish for their teams right now is highly, highly valued. So for a lot of us, the most normal thing we have going on in our lives is our work.
Yeah.
So there's the transparency piece, and you know, that's an easy word to throw around, but that's the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? Yeah. Also,
by the way, with the caution that people are looking at you and your behavior, right?
Yes.
So if you're panicking and freaking out, your team will follow suit. If you're not doing what you say you're going to do, your team is going to follow suit. So it's you know, packaged properly.
Right. So it's kind of like my daughter came home right at the very beginning, right? It was right as schools were shutting down. And she was like, oh my gosh, Mom, we have to go to the grocery store right now because all the grocery stores are shutting down. And she was fearful and she was freaked out, and she's 13, right? So fine. But I told her, I said, you can't do that because A, it's not accurate, and B, all you're doing is freaking other people out more than they need to be. So that, I think that goes along with that. I'm going to say one last thing. I know I don't want to monopolize too much time on this, but connection right now is incredibly important, especially if you have people that are working from home. So the Kaiser Family Foundation actually did a study, and they found that 1 in 5 members of the American workforce right now is suffering from feelings of loneliness and isolation. So this goes with the dark side of working from home, is we're not getting that connection. And we have to be intentional as leaders. We don't get to run into each other in the hallways or in the break room. All the connection, all the communication that we're doing has to be very intentional, and you have to drive that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and you had asked me about something that I used to do. I was working at one point leading 3 different teams in an environment that there was a lot of turnover and a lot of acquisitions and layoffs. And we used to do fun Fridays and that was the day that we were doing creative work.
Mhm.
And it was fun. We used to go out to lunch and then we would come back to close the office and we would be really silly and the best ideas would bubble up. And this is something that you could actually do remotely. I know Maggie is on the call, and Maggie and I have done a lot of work on design thinking methodology, and we've actually taken a course together with Ideal, and we did it remote. And the reality is that you can do a lot of brainstorming remote and make it very light. And this seems particularly important because some of the issues and ideas that you need to tackle on right now are very heavy when you're trying to think about your strategy and your outline for next steps. And it's also a very emotional time.
Mhm.
And Brandy, can you put the chart on strategy? The next one.
Okay, I will. I want to say just a couple more things.
Okay, go ahead. Go for it.
Absolutely. So I love that idea of Fun Fridays. You know, I've seen a lot of teams do this water cooler Wednesday thing where they have a 30-minute Zoom meeting and they don't talk about work. They just talk about whatever Netflix show they're watching, or they vent about their kids, or whatever the case may be. But the point is that it's connection. And when you kind of go away from the stress and the anxiety and then you come back, it allows you to be more creative, to Linda's point, and to tackle some of those issues. Last thing I want to say about well-being for your team members is make sure that there are some boundaries that exist, right? So one of the things I know, I have a small team, right? I have a small company. And I, as the captain of the ship, I work on the weekends. I work every Sunday. And I was noticing that I would send like 6 emails out to my assistant on Sunday afternoons, and she would respond immediately. And I'm like, dude, you don't have to do that. Like, that's not your responsibility. And finally, what I started doing was leveraging the power of Gmail, and I think Outlook does this too, for scheduled sending. So I would just schedule things to go out on Monday so that it wasn't just sitting in my assistant's email box for her to have to deal with.
Okay, so I know that we're coming to the top of the hour. I'm going to be a little quick on this, but I think that all of us as business leaders and all of us as department heads and leading new organizations, this is pretty much what we do on a daily basis. But as you're thinking through, what now and what next, the world has changed completely and you need to change with them. And I think that the challenge, and I really see it as an opportunity, is for you to figure out how are you going to address this new world. And for me, the best tool that I know for this is the business model canvas, or the lean startup methodology. People know it as in different ways. But whether you're a startup or you're setting a new division, it's really a terrific framework because it walks you through understanding really who your ideal client is today and maybe in the next 4 months. What are the key issues that they're going to be encountering? And how do you need to be delivering on this promise? Who will be your strategic alliance partners? What are the channels to reach them through? And what are the new channels that you need to consider? I mean, we're going to be providing this framework alongside other things after this call. And Brandy and I are definitely available to help you walk through this framework, whether you are an established company and reaping great success. Because the new world is going to change, you might need to tweak it, or, as I said previously, you need to get a white sheet of paper and start over. So as I said, just review your industry, follow the bullet points, and we're also going to be sending you this framework because I want to make sure that we have time for Q&A. I know we're coming close to the top of the hour.
Yeah, so as Linda mentioned, we have a decision-making framework, which we'll be sharing with you. The tool that Linda just talked about was sharing as well, but we want to make sure that we're addressing any questions that came up.
So should we go back? So Brandy and Linda, should we open up the chat box now just to see?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
that'd be great.
Okay. Alicia, are you doing that or am I doing that? Because I'm just going to go to the show group video. No, that's not it.
So Brandy, just if you wanted to exit out of your screen, you'd be able to.
That,
well.
All right. Okay, there we go.
And then let's put the chat box up.
And Susie has a question.
I think there was some at the very beginning. I was just going to start at the top and go down, but we can look at all of them. I think Susie got her question answered, I'm sure. Yes, the flexibility was the fourth one. Maggie, I think your question was connectiveness. Your first comment was connectedness, really, but I think that's been answered because we were talking about connection in a different way. And so I hope that was the one that was answered to you. And some of the, well, let me open it up because we've got people here from, it was great. Brandy and Linda, thank you so much. I think you gave a very comprehensive overview of making those tough decisions. And the fact that you're going to provide both your slides, remember both the slides and resources will be shared along with the webinar. So the only thing that I don't have, and it was really interesting, I kind of searched some of you as I was also listening, and I was very curious about Alan Burke, who's from Alan, is it correct that you're from Hello Technologies? And I saw that you were doing 3D printing and scanning. Is that correct, Alan? Can you unmute yourself, ladies and gentlemen, for this discussion?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Alan. Where are you located, Alan? Because I saw some Alan Burks that were not you.
It doesn't seem to be working for me.
Yeah, no, Alan, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Where are you, Alan? Great. Where are you located, Alan?
If it's Alan from Hello, if it's Alan from Hello, he's actually in San Juan, Puerto Rico. He is a startup and phenomenal. He's a great collaborator in the ecosystem. And Hello is an app that provides part-time assistance like if you need, is a peer-to-peer skill sharing marketplace.
Okay.
Launching in San Juan.
Great. Well, that there seem to be a lot of organizations, and Maggie, you've got something coming up tomorrow, I think May 7th, some kind of a session. And do you want to just ask your questions, but do you want to share something about that very quickly?
Sure. My primary interest is in how we manage change. And I'm coming at this from the perspective of an educator. And so I also educate people in managing change in business, but my main focus has been over the years in education. And I'm very interested now in helping people to think about how we deal with the rising levels of anxiety and depression among young people. And the meeting tomorrow will be the first in what I hope is a series about future phobia, and the focus tomorrow will be on what the causes of future phobia are, and then we will gradually build toward how we can, through this global network and community, think about what we're doing in education and at home and in our communities that might mitigate the effects of future phobia and might empower young people to deal with an uncertain today and future.
I also saw on your information, you're not only teaching young people the educational part, but you also mentioned environment and climate action, etc. So right. I thought that was a connection with Leanne.
Yes, it is. Leanne and I have met already, and it was a
Okay,
great
good.
honor of mine that Leanne asked if I would do one of her video segments on.
Very good. Okay.
Right.
I was just looking at all
we
the
have that connection too.
I was looking at all the possible connections between all of you, and then of course Susan, you're Geminar. Is that how you pronounce it?
Geminar, that's right. Yes.
Okay. And are you in Victoria Eastwood's GYB board?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you. Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm taking up the space here, and I don't mean to, but it was just that there was a lot of great things that happened, and I want to add two more. I know that Brandy started with saying collaboration and connection, and I want to add two more C's to the. I love the C words, and I think that for a lot, I want to add that it takes confidence that you can pivot and that you can go on, and it takes courage. And sometimes that courage means that you're investing in your business now when you never thought you would be. So I wanted to add that to your other four words of empathy, transparency, and flexibility. I'm just looking through the questions here.
Susie
Susie
just
has
posted one.
Question, and I'm not quite clear. Susie, can you clarify a little bit? What do you mean by hanging on to things going back to normal eventually? Are you meaning that you've stopped operations?
No, I'm thinking of some of my board members who may believe that things will in fact just go back to normal, like go back to where we were in January, and hanging on to that notion of, oh, you know, in September things will be back. I'm not going to concern myself, because I feel that there is that kind of optimism, and I'm not
gotta
sure
say,
that's healthy.
I think that, you know, having major scars from 9/11, 2008, Hurricane Maria, I mean, I have serious scars, right? But I can understand it. I work with a lot of startups and young people, and I spoke to one of them, and he caught me probably on a Friday afternoon when I take the truth serum. And it was like unvarnished, right? It was just one of those days. And I said, listen, and I get it. He's never lived through this, right? He's 10 years old. And so I said, look, hang on to dear life. I'm really sorry, but hang on to dear life. The reality is that you're really fortunate. You have a software company targeting software as a service providers that could adjust to this a little bit easier. But be ready to do whatever it takes to do a side hustle so you can keep the company open, because your sales are going to plummet and your new reality will be different completely, even if your clients survive. And so, Susie, honestly, I'm happy to have the Truth Serum Day and talk to your team, because he was, after I saw the look of fear on the poor kid's face, I felt really bad. I mean, he's literally like 20 years old, and I felt really bad that afterwards I said, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Let me package it for you. He goes, oh God, no, this was the best conversation I've had. It was because everybody's so busy making, rainbows and unicorns that I don't really know what to prepare for. And so, Susie, the reality is that even if, like 2008 really wasn't that bad if you think about it, right? There was like 2 or 3 industries that were really hit, but everything else was kind of normal. All they needed to do was put a couple of discounts and we were all back to shopping, right? Or flying. But that's not the case now, because the rules are different. And so I'm happy to have one of these brutal conversations, what do they call it? Candid? Brutal candor conversation.
So Susie, I'd like to just add a little bit of an example. It's smaller, but I think it might be helpful. So I actually had a client of mine, and their industry and their company has been around for over 100 years. They have a very traditional approach to doing work, right? Like everyone shows up in their ties, and work from home was not something that was even remotely considered prior to COVID. Well, not surprisingly, a lot of the team members are like, this is fantastic. I want to do this forever. And so I had a conversation with the president of the company, and she was like, oh, Brandy, I'm just letting you know right now that those people are all going to be coming right back to the office. This is not how we're going to operate. And so I very gently, lovingly tried to coach her and say, okay, before we shut the door on that, let's take a look at some of the measurement success. How is productivity? What are the things that are important that you're measuring? Were your people able to hit those marks, right? Were they able to perform? Is there some gray area, right? Is it 100% work at home or 100% be in the office? Can there be some flexibility? And then I took it for her in a little bit of a different way. And I said, what's the opportunity here? So, she very much had it in her mind that we're going to go back to normal. This is the way that it's going to be. And I said, well, maybe there might be something else in the middle that will give you even better results if you adapt a little bit, if you're a little flexible.
So this is interesting. Jay just made a comment similar about, there's no point in planning if we're going to run out of, we have to running out of cash. We have Amanda here from Alberta Treasury Branch. And of course, being in the financial banking system. Amanda, can you add to Jay's comment and as well as Linda and Brandy?
So yeah, the last 8 weeks have been really tough in the financial industry. I can say that I haven't worked as long of hours as I've ever in the last 8 weeks, just trying to get the relief programs out to people as fast as we can. And here in Canada, they're called the CEBA loan. So it was $40,000 to small businesses that was for operational non-deferrable costs. And what I'm recommending to my clients directly is to keep those funds separate from regular operating funds, just so they can keep track of just the use of it for tax purposes. But, our concern isn't so much of getting through this shutdown time as it is getting to the startup time again, because when we open our doors again, the costs are going to be well in advance to the money coming back through the doors. And I think that's where we'll see a lot of people struggle. So when you're doing your planning, you have to really make sure that you can plan out further rather than just the immediate get through right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I like some of the comments that have been said. I think, Leanne, you shared, it's not about the new normal, it's about the next normal. And I think that's very, very true. And, sometimes I think that we have to just be honest and realistic with people. And so I know that that's where the support groups really come in. And so thank you so much to all of you. I think there's been some great conversations in today's session. And what I really want to thank is that we have a global audience. We have Connecticut, okay, wherever that sea is on the East Coast. We have Puerto Rico. We have, it's great to have Northern BC, Ontario, Southern Ontario. It's great, great. Thank you so much. And thank you, Brandy and Linda, for being and I think Alicia said it nicely. She said it was like a conversation today. And that really felt good. And I know that we'll reach out to you both in receiving your LinkedIn. And for those who are not a part of Grow Your Biz, know that you still can access the webinar because you registered for this and the slides. And all of that information will be given to you in the follow-up. So the very thing we're going
Barb, can I just say one closing thing? Just to recognize these two lovely ladies who are on one of the boards that I chair. But they, correct me if I'm wrong, but pretty sure you guys just met on our board.
Yes, they did. Just
yeah. Yeah, and they connected immediately. And by the next meeting, they were doing stuff together already. So I just want to talk to the power of the network. So it's
yeah,
cool.
and Leanne, I do have to say that you lead a really good group because it's not just Brandy and I. Now I'm working with Christine. So, I mean, I think our team really connects. And don't worry, you're on our road trip. I was telling Barbara that I'm taking a road trip.
Like we're going to go to
Brandy and heading up to Canada.
Seattle and Puerto Rico, and we've already got it planned. We're going to be part of this great road trip. Maybe we'll go to northern BC. I don't know.
Alicia, this is Jay. Just a comment also to add to the previous comment. You know, I've enjoyed the presentation. It was very sort of concise and impactful. And congratulations to Linda and Brandy on putting a great presentation together. You know, Linda, I know you for a while. You're a real master strategist, and you brought that to the table here. And the key words, really, the takeaway message for me and hopefully for others is playbook. Yeah. You know, you need to have a playbook, and that's, you know, whether it's flexibility, you know, all the things we talked about, is to develop that and then sort of just adjust and fine tune as you go and as you learn new things. So that's sort of my takeaway, and thank you for that.
No, thank you, Jay. And thank you for coming today. It's great.
So 2 more things very quickly. Alicia will be sending out. So Jay, I know this is recorded and maybe I'll use your little clip at some point, but Alicia will be sending you a quick evaluation follow-up. Please respond to that. That would be great. And the second thing is that if you can connect with us, we would love for you to continue and see. This was the first of the May series for our webinars. We had a successful April. And the other thing that we offer, I've got to do a plug for Grow Your Biz, is that if anybody wants to know about what it means to be in a global virtual board with Grow Your Biz, we have 4 sessions coming up. That's a 1-hour free trial. Maggie, I'm looking at you. And it is great. 2 of the sessions are led by our lovely Mark Hatchie, who is in this session right now. And then the other one is by Marla Cott. So we've got those already planned for May. And it gives an opportunity for just 2 to 4 people to be on a 1-hour call with a chair and manage with a chair like Leanne. So please, if you refer somebody and, well, here's the sell off. If you refer somebody and they join, you get $100, period, point blank. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter where. So it's just about how do you know what a true Grow Your Biz advisory board is all about unless you try it. So we're doing these trial 1-hour sessions. And Jay and Alan, we are open to men. Honestly, we emphasize women, but we are open to men because what you offered today in your comments was fabulous. So it's about making those right connections for people who value each other. Thank you.
My apologies. I really did not know anything about this group. I just I knew Linda. I saw her LinkedIn post. I said, this is interesting. I should get on it. That's all I knew.
I love it. Jay,
that would bring you to the best places, Jay.
Am I the only guy on this thing? You know?
No. You're good company. Alan is here too.
Alan are both here, and I love it. And I love Hello. I mean, I'm looking at Hello Technologies. I don't know what your company is, Jay, but I'm going to find out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Really quickly, you guys. Just Linda and I would love to chat with you. We'd love to connect with you. So if you want to talk more about your 30, 60, 90-day plan, if Linda has very graciously offered at a deeply discounted rate to take a look at your product mix and kind of give you some recommendations on next steps. If you want to talk more about culture and workforce and what that looks like in our current context, please feel free to reach out to one of us. Our contact information, when you get the PowerPoint, you'll see all of our contact information within that. And frankly, and I don't know, Linda, how you feel, but I really miss people. So I would love to connect with you anyway.
Call us and say hi.
Absolutely.
Sure, we're going to have good coffee and good jokes. That's
right.
it.
Continue to join us, Jay and Alan and everyone else that is from different parts of the world. Thank you so much.
All right.
And,
Bye.
Guys, take
Thanks.
care. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks, Leanne.